the inner architect, a journey through the mind, the heart, and the illusions that keep us small. Inspired by Peter Crone, written and published by Audible Aria. This isn't a self-help audiobook. It's not a motivational speech. It's a remembrance of who you were before the world told you who to be. Before the roles, the stories, the strategies of survival. Before fear disguised itself as logic and performance replaced presence. In these chapters, you won't find quick fixes. You'll find truths, spoken not to your intellect, but to your soul. You'll be invited to let go of old identities, to rewrite the story of your pain, to step into the unknown not as a threat, but as a portal, and ultimately, to return to the one thing that never left you, love. So wherever you are right now, whether you're healing, expanding, grieving, or becoming, know this: you're not broken, you're not behind, you're right on time. And this is your invitation to remember. Chapter 1. The addiction to being right. There's a deep, unseen force that drives much of human suffering. And it's not pain, it's not trauma, it's not even fear. It's the need to be right. Being right is the ego's favorite addiction. It's not just about being correct in an argument. It's about protecting a fragile identity that says, if I'm wrong, I might not be lovable. If I'm wrong, I might not be safe. So instead of choosing peace, we choose righteousness. Instead of love, we cling to pride. This is the great paradox. People would rather sabotage their own joy, their relationships, their potential, just to be right about their own limitations. Why? Because it gives them the illusion of control. That's all the ego wants. Control, predictability. And to maintain that illusion, it will burn your life down, as long as it gets to be right about the story it tells. Now, you might think that sounds crazy. Who would consciously choose misery over happiness? But no one chooses it consciously. It's unconscious. It's a blind loop of self-justification. If I believe I'm not good enough, I'll constantly attract and even create scenarios that prove it. Not because I want to suffer, but because I want to be right about my identity. I want the world to confirm it for me. And that's why people say things like, see? That always happens to me. Or, I knew they'd let me down. That's not objective analysis. That's narrative reinforcement. That's the ego doing its job. Being right about who you believe you are, even if who you believe you are is someone unworthy, abandoned, broken, or small. There's a phrase I use often. Being right is the poor man's version of self-worth. It gives you a counterfeit sense of power. You stand there in the wreckage of your life, but you stand there proudly because at least you were right. And that feeling, that righteousness, becomes more important than your own healing. Let me offer you something radical. What if you gave up the need to be right? Not to be wrong, not to collapse into guilt or shame, but simply to become free. To say, I don't need to defend this anymore. I don't need to prove anything. I don't need to be right. I just want to be real. Because being real, that's where freedom begins. That's where love can finally land. That's when the prison walls start to dissolve, and you realize they were never real in the first place. The ego is terrified of this, because without the identity it's constructed, the one that says, this is who I am, and this is what I deserve, it doesn't know what's left. But I'll tell you, what's left is your essence. What's left is spaciousness. What's left is the real you. Not the story, not the persona, but the you that was never broken to begin with. So let this be the beginning of surrendering the need to be right. Not because you've lost anything, but because you finally realized it was never worth it. Chapter 2. The pleasure in suffering. Most people think they want to feel good, joy, peace, love, all the positive emotions. But the truth is, there's a subtle, seductive pleasure in our pain. And until we get radically honest about that, we'll never be free of it. Now that might sound strange at first. Pleasure in suffering? Who wants to suffer? But suffering feeds the ego. And the ego, as I've said, only cares about self-preservation, not happiness. It wants to be right. It wants to control. It wants to survive. And if pain reinforces the ego's narrative, it will cling to that pain like its life support. Let me give you an example. Someone who constantly tells themselves, "I'm never good enough," will find relationships, jobs, or outcomes that echo that belief. And when they don't get the love they want, when they feel abandoned or rejected again, there's a dark satisfaction. See, I told you, this always happens to me. There's a little egoic smirk that says, I was right. That is pleasure. Twisted, unconscious, but pleasure nonetheless. The Buddhists speak of this as shenpa, the hook, that rise of energy when we get triggered, when we indulge anger or shame or self-pity. It's almost like an emotional release, an orgasm of the ego. It's momentary, it's destructive, but it's familiar. And the ego loves the familiar more than it loves freedom. Think about it. We replay painful memories. We argue in our heads. We dwell in resentment. And we nurse our wounds like prized possessions. Why? Because suffering makes us feel something. And that something feels safer than the vast unknown of peace. Let that sink in. You have been choosing pain because it makes you feel safe. Not because it's comfortable, but because it's known. Because it allows you to reinforce the story. This is who I am. This is how life treats me. This is what I deserve. And in that moment, you're not even present. You're just reactivating the same neural pathways, the same emotions, the same identity, over and over. It's like emotional autopilot. And it's exhausting. But here's the truth. Suffering is not noble. It's not strength. It's not your identity. It's a clue, a divine breadcrumb. It's showing you where your love got interrupted, where your innocence got bruised, where your sense of self got hijacked by a belief that you weren't enough. So instead of indulging in that pain like a drug, pause, breathe, get curious. Ask yourself, what part of me believes I deserve this? What story am I keeping alive by holding on to this? And am I ready to let it die? Because freedom isn't found in fixing suffering. Freedom is found in no longer feeding it. What you're really longing for isn't just to stop hurting. It's to stop identifying with the one who hurts, the one who believes they are broken, the one who gets to feel powerful by feeling pitiful, the one who finds self-worth in suffering. Let that part die. I'm not asking you to suppress your pain. I'm asking you to meet it with love, to see what it's been hiding. A little boy or girl aching to be seen, not for how they suffer, but for how deeply they feel. Suffering is the disguise. Your sensitivity is the gift. So don't shame yourself for the pain, but stop pretending it's who you are. It's not. Who you are is behind the story, beyond the wound, before the fall. And when you touch that space, suffering has nothing left to cling to. Chapter 3. The Justification Trap. The ego doesn't want happiness. It wants justification. It wants to be justified in how it sees the world, in how it defines other people, in how it labels itself. And it will go to extraordinary lengths, even at the cost of your relationships, your joy and your peace, to maintain that internal consistency. Because what the ego fears more than pain is change. See, it's not just that you feel anger or sadness or shame. It's that you've built an identity around those emotions. You don't just feel abandoned. You are someone who always gets left. You don't just feel anxious. You are an anxious person. And every time life reflects those beliefs back to you, you feel a kind of twisted relief. I knew it. I knew this would happen. And in that moment, the ego sighs, "Ah, see? We were right." But that's not truth. That's not freedom. That's justification. And the problem with justification is that it's addictive. It feeds on patterns. The more you justify your limitations, the more you look for reasons to stay small. And the more you stay small, the more justified you feel. It becomes a loop, a self-fulfilling prophecy of suffering. You don't just react to life. You orchestrate your reality to support your inner narrative. You attract people who treat you the way you secretly believe you deserve. You sabotage opportunities so you don't have to confront your worth. You see danger where there is none, betrayal where there is fear, and resistance where there is just unfamiliarity. And all of this is done to protect one illusion. I am who I think I am. But who told you that? Who said you're not lovable? Who said you're too much or not enough? Who said you always get left or always mess things up? Was it your father, your ex, that teacher in school who saw your gift and didn't know how to meet it? Whoever it was, their voice became your inner monologue, and you've been justifying it ever since. But what if you stopped? What if you let go of the need to explain your pain? What if you didn't need a story to feel whole? That's where liberation lives. It doesn't live in being right. It lives in being real. It lives in saying, yes, I've suffered. Yes, I've been hurt. But I'm not going to build my identity around it. I'm not going to carry it around like a business card I hand out to every new relationship. I'm going to put the story down. I'm going to stop justifying my fear and start reclaiming my power. Because here's the secret. You don't need to be right. You need to be free. So the next time you catch yourself saying, "This always happens to me," or "I knew they'd leave," or "Why even try?" Stop. Pause. Listen. That's not you speaking. That's a younger version of you trying to protect themselves with an old belief. Don't make them wrong. Just love them. And remind them, we don't live there anymore. You're not here to prove you're suffering. You're here to dismantle the lie that you needed to suffer at all. That's the real work. And it begins when you stop justifying who you are and start becoming who you truly are beneath the justification. Chapter 4. The Ego's Death. Why change feels like dying. Most people don't fear growth. What they fear is death, but not the kind of death that ends a life, the kind that ends a self. Because true transformation isn't about fine-tuning your habits or shifting a little mindset here and there. It's about dissolving who you thought you were. And for the ego, that feels like dying. The ego is a fixed structure. It's rigid. It's rooted in survival, in old identities, old roles, and old stories. So when you start to question it, when you even consider changing your view of yourself, the ego panics. It fights back. It defends itself like a cornered animal. even if the change you're inviting would set you free. That resistance you feel when you try to evolve, that's not laziness. That's fear of ego death. Because if you are no longer the victim, the abandoned one, the overachiever, the broken one, then who are you? And that space, that void of identity, is terrifying. But it's also where freedom lives. It's like the snake shedding its skin. That skin has been protection. It's familiar. It's tight, sure. But at least it feels like you. So when it starts to peel, when life demands you expand, part of you wants to cling to that old casing. Even if it no longer fits. Even if it's suffocating you. Because the mind doesn't trust what comes next. The old self says, if I let go of this, I'll disappear. But that's the illusion. You don't disappear. You awaken. Because who you truly are isn't the identity you constructed. It's the awareness that holds it all. It's the space in which the roles have played out. It's the formless, eternal essence behind the name, the job, the wounds, the resume, the heartbreaks. Change isn't about becoming something new. It's about remembering something eternal. And yes, to the ego, that feels like death. Because it is. But it's also rebirth. When you stop identifying with your limitations, you don't lose yourself. You lose your constraints. You lose the need to be liked. You lose the weight of other people's expectations. You lose the addiction to the story that you are anything less than whole. That's not death. That's resurrection. But the transition can be messy. There will be grief. You'll miss the old you even if that version was in pain. Because pain is familiar. And freedom at first can feel disorienting. It's okay. Let yourself mourn the old self. Let yourself honor how hard they worked to keep you safe. Let yourself say goodbye to the parts of you that were built on trauma, on fear, on needing to be enough. And then, breathe. Because something new is being born. And not because you forced it, but because you finally allowed it. This is why people don't change when they're motivated. They change when their old identity becomes too painful to carry. They change when life brings them to their knees and says, you can't keep doing this. They change when they see that holding on is the real suffering. So if you're there, if you're in that space where the old self is crumbling and the new one hasn't fully emerged, trust it. Don't rush. Don't run. Just be with it. The death of the ego is the birth of the soul. And the soul doesn't need to prove anything. It doesn't need to defend. It simply is. And that being, that presence, is where your power lives. So, let the old self die. Let it fall apart. Because what's coming is not just a better version of you. It's the truth of who you've always been. Chapter 5. Sabotage in Relationships. Why we stay stuck. Relationships don't break down because of incompatibility. They break down because of ego preservation. See, most people think they're in a relationship with another person. But what they're really in is a relationship with their idea of themselves. And they're using the other person to validate that idea. So when your partner says or does something that challenges your identity, something that brushes against a wound you haven't healed, you don't meet them as a conscious being. You meet them as a hurt child. And that child isn't interested in connection. That child is trying to survive. That's why you pull away when you feel unheard. That's why you lash out when you feel criticized. That's why you go silent or start controlling or keep score. Not because you're mean, but because your identity feels threatened. Every fight in a relationship is a defense of identity. It's not about what they said. It's not about who forgot to take the trash out. It's about what it meant to you, what it triggered in you. This means I'm not valued. This proves I'm always the one who cares more. This confirms I'm not lovable. And now, instead of relating from the heart, you're reacting from the wound. But here's what most people miss. The fight isn't the problem. The preservation of identity is. Because underneath the argument is something beautiful. There's vulnerability. There's fear. There's a part of you that just wants to be seen, heard, held. But the ego doesn't want that. The ego wants to be right. It wants to say, you wronged me. It wants to say, I'm the victim here. It wants to say, I was justified in shutting down, in walking away, in raising my voice. Because if you admit you were hurt, really hurt, you'd have to drop the armor. You'd have to risk being open. You'd have to let go of being right, to make space for being real. That's terrifying for most people. Why? Because they've never been loved in their rawness. They've only known conditional love, the kind that says, you're worthy if you behave, if you succeed, if you don't upset anyone. So what do? We become masters of pretending. We pretend to be strong when we're scared. We pretend to be indifferent when we're aching. We pretend to be okay when we're screaming inside. But here's the truth. Relationships can't thrive in pretense. They only thrive in presence. When you drop the act, when you stop trying to manage your image and start revealing your soul, something miraculous happens. The armor begins to fall, the heart begins to soften, and the space between you becomes safe again. But that can't happen if you're trying to win. It can't happen if you're still invested in being right. It can't happen if you're afraid to be seen. So ask yourself, in this moment, do I want to be right? Or do I want to be close? Because you can't have both. Let the relationship become the arena where the ego dies. Again and again. And love is born in its place. That's real intimacy. It's not perfect. It's not polished. It's not always peaceful. But it's honest. It's human. And it's where freedom begins, not in avoiding the conflict, but in meeting it with openness, not in silencing the pain, but in listening to what it wants you to see, not in proving your position, but in surrendering to the connection that's waiting on the other side. That's what love asks for. Your presence, not your performance. Chapter 6. How Identity Hijacks Intimacy. Most relationships aren't two people falling in love. They're two identities looking for validation. And this is why so many partnerships, even the well-intentioned ones, even the ones filled with chemistry, start to crumble. Not because the love isn't real, but because the idea of self is still running the show. Let me explain. Each of us builds a psychological construct, a self-image, a role, a story, shaped by our childhood, our wounds, our triumphs, our traumas. We become the caregiver, or the fixer, or the independent one, or the one who always gets left. And once that identity takes root, we unconsciously require our relationships to support it. That's when intimacy gets hijacked. You're no longer relating with your partner. You're using them to reinforce who you think you are. If I identify as not enough, I'll attract situations, even people, that subtly affirm that belief. And I'll mistake emotional inconsistency for passion or withdrawal for depth. If they leave, it confirms my identity. If they stay, I won't trust it. Either way, I remain loyal to the story, not to the love. And the madness is, this identity isn't even true. It was formed when you were too young to question it, when your nervous system was just trying to survive. But now it's dictating the quality of your connection. You'll know identity is active in your relationship when you feel a need to be the good one, a need to control the narrative, a constant fear of being left or seen as too much, or a sense of shrinking, playing a role so the other person doesn't leave. These are not signs of love. These are signs of survival, and no one can be fully intimate while they're busy surviving. So what's the alternative? It's presence. It's surrender. It's a willingness to allow love to disrupt your identity, not reinforce it. It means showing up without the role, without the performance, without the need to convince someone you're worthy. And yes, that's vulnerable, terrifying even, because it means putting down the shield you've carried for years. It means risking being seen in the raw, unpolished places. It means admitting that you want to be held, not just admired. But that's the gateway to intimacy, because intimacy, real intimacy, doesn't require you to be someone. It requires you to drop someone. The false self, the illusion of control, the armor of expectation. You can't be loved for who you are if you're constantly trying to prove who you think you should be. And here's the paradox. When you let go of your identity, the love that meets you feels deeper than anything you've ever known. Why? Because it's not loving your performance. It's loving your presence. It's not loving what you do. It's loving that you are. So, the next time you feel triggered in relationship, ask yourself, am I defending my identity? Or am I making space for intimacy? Because one of those keeps you stuck in the past, and the other sets you free. Your identity wants protection. Your soul wants connection. Only one of them gets to drive. Choose wisely. Chapter 7. You are not your past. You are not your past. You are not what happened to you. You are not who hurt you. You are not what they said or didn't say. You are not even who you believed you were because of it. But the mind doesn't know that. The mind collects experiences like a photo album. It says, this happened, so that must mean something about me. It's always trying to make meaning, to make sense of the chaos. So when you felt rejected, the mind said, I must not be lovable. When you failed, the mind said, I'm not good enough. When someone left, it whispered, I'm too much. And that's how an identity is born, not out of truth, but out of trauma. Then we carry that story into every corner of our lives, into relationships, into work, into how we treat our bodies, how we speak to ourselves, how we show up in the world. But here's the beautiful, and sometimes terrifying, truth. None of it is who you really are. You've been living a life based on echoes of a moment that was never processed, echoes of pain that was never loved, echoes of beliefs that were never questioned. And the echo keeps bouncing until you finally stop and say, wait, who told me this? Because the moment you question your story, you create the space to rewrite it. But you can't rewrite a story you're still defending. You can't let go of the past while you're still using it to define your value. I see this all the time. People protecting their suffering like it's sacred. You don't understand what I went through. And maybe I don't. But what I do know is this. The pain that shaped you doesn't have to own you. Your past happened. It's real. But the meaning you gave it, that's optional. It's not what happened. It's the interpretation you live by. And most of those interpretations were made when you were too young to question them. A child felt fear and made it mean I'm not safe. A teenager felt heartbreak and decided I'm unlovable. A 20-something failed and concluded I'll never succeed. And now? You're still reacting from that frozen point in time. That's not adulthood. That's emotional time travel. But the good news, you can come home now. You don't have to carry the weight of those old moments any longer. You don't have to repeat patterns that were based on misunderstanding. Because you get to choose. You get to choose who you are today. Not based on memory, but based on possibility. Not based on fear, but based on presence. You are not the abandoned one. You are not the mistake. You are not the failure, the divorce, the diagnosis, the trauma. You are awareness. You are potential. You are presence. And in this moment, you are free. Free to release the past. Free to forgive the parts of you that didn't know better. Free to breathe differently. Free to become the version of yourself that was never wounded. Only waiting. So stop living like the past is still happening. It's not. But the future? That's yours to create. The moment you remember who you are, beyond the echo. Chapter 8. Freedom lives in uncertainty. The mind loves certainty. It craves it like oxygen. Wants to know what's coming next. Wants to predict, control, plan, strategize. It wants to reduce life to a formula because if it can know, it thinks it can stay safe. But here's the truth. Most people don't want to face. Certainty is a fantasy. There is no certainty. There never has been. The only thing that's certain is that everything is changing. And yet we suffer, not because of change, but because we resist change. We try to live in a world of guarantees, while life keeps reminding us. This is not how it works. What if, instead of clinging to control, you relaxed into not knowing? What if uncertainty wasn't a threat, but an invitation? See, the mind says, if I don't know what will happen, I can't be okay. But the soul says, I've never known what's coming, and I've always been okay. This is the great shift, from control to trust, from fear to flow. You want to feel powerful? Learn to live inside, I don't know, and be at peace there. That's where real freedom lives. Because when you embrace uncertainty, you stop needing a life to match your expectations. You stop needing people to behave a certain way. You stop needing the outcome to justify your effort. You stop defining your worth by the reaction, the result, or the reward. You just show up, present, whole, unattached. That doesn't mean passive. It doesn't mean you stop dreaming or creating or moving forward. It means you release your grip on how it has to look. It means you trust the unfolding more than the plan. You let life surprise you. And it will. Always. In ways the mind could never predict. But it's terrifying at first, isn't it? Because uncertainty means we have to let go. Let go of the identity that says, I need to know to be safe. Let go of the story that says, my past defines my future. Let go of the illusion that we are running the show. But here's the irony. When you let go of control, you gain access to power. Not control over life, but power within life. Power to stay grounded when things change. Power to stay soft when others react. Power to stay open when things don't go your way. That's spiritual power, and it only lives in the unknown. So if you find yourself in a season of uncertainty right now, in between jobs, in between identities, in between versions of yourself, breathe. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're becoming. The ego will panic. It always does. It will say, we need a plan. We need answers. But don't let fear dictate your direction. Instead, ask, can I be with this? Can I be with the unknown without making it wrong? Can I trust that something greater is at work here? Even if I don't understand it, yeah. Because the unknown is not empty. It's not a void. It's the most fertile ground in existence. It's where real creation begins. It's where your true self is waiting. Not with a blueprint, but with an invitation. Let go. Let go of the need to know. And meet yourself in the mystery. That's where freedom lives. Chapter 9. Controlling the external versus mastering the internal. Most people spend their lives trying to fix the world outside of them. They think, once I make more money, then I'll feel secure. Once they love me the way I need, then I'll feel whole. Once I lose the weight, change my job, fix the relationship, get the validation, then I'll finally be at peace. But let me ask you something. Has it worked? Has all the effort to manage, control, and rearrange life ever brought lasting peace? Or has it left you exhausted, constantly chasing a future where you might feel okay? For a moment? This is the great misunderstanding of human suffering. The belief that peace is a byproduct of circumstance. It's not. Peace is not out there. It never has been. It's within. And until you stop trying to control what's outside of you and start mastering what's inside, you'll always be one step away from freedom. Imagine this. You're driving through Phoenix in the peak of summer. It's 115 degrees outside. And instead of rolling up your windows, you blast the air conditioning. Windows wide open, trying to cool down the whole state of Arizona. That's what we do every day. We try to control the temperature of the world to regulate our internal climate. But the wiser choice? Roll up the windows, regulate from within, master your inner world, and the outer world loses its power over you. Because here's the truth. Life doesn't owe you comfort. It's not here to conform to your preferences. People will disappoint you. Circumstances will shift. Nothing out there is permanent. So if your peace depends on stability out there, you will always be at the mercy of things you cannot control. That's not empowerment. That's slavery. Real power is this. I am okay, not because of what's happening, but regardless of what's happening. That's sovereignty. That's freedom. It doesn't mean you don't take action. It doesn't mean you don't build things, love deeply, or chase dreams. But you don't do it from need. You don't do it from lack. You don't do it from the illusion that your peace lives in the result. You do it from fullness, from creativity, from presence. Because the moment you believe, I need this to go a certain way, so I can feel okay, you've already lost. That mindset creates fear, anxiety, pressure. And when things don't go your way, you spiral. But if you shift, if you say, no matter what happens, I will meet it from peace, now you're free. You're no longer a victim of circumstance. You're the creator of your experience. That's not just philosophy. That's practice. It's breath by breath, moment by moment, learning to choose peace over panic, presence over projection, response over reaction. So the next time life throws something unexpected your way, pause. Ask yourself, am I trying to control the external? Or am I being invited to master the internal? The external is always changing. The internal is where your real life lives. And when you master that, you don't need the world to behave. Because your peace is no longer conditional. It's chosen. Every time. Chapter 10. Why growth feels unsafe. Everyone says they want to grow. We say we want to evolve, expand, heal, break through. We read the books, we attend the workshops, we repeat the affirmations. But underneath that desire, deep in the nervous system, there's often another truth. Growth feels unsafe. Not because it is unsafe, but because we've been conditioned to associate the familiar with safety. Even if that familiarity is rooted in pain. Let's unpack that. You might consciously want abundance. But if you grew up in scarcity, if your body remembers stress around money, if love in your household was tangled up with lack, then growth threatens the identity that helped you survive. And the body will resist that. Because to the subconscious, familiarity equals survival. And anything unfamiliar, even peace, even joy, even ease, can feel like danger. So when you're on the verge of expansion, when something beautiful is about to land, a new relationship, a new opportunity, a new level of visibility or success, what happens? You pull back, you sabotage, you procrastinate, you pick a fight, you overthink, you delay. Why? Because your system is still trying to stay safe in an old world that no longer exists. It's not logical, it's biological. Your nervous system is wired to protect the identity you built to survive, not the truth that's now trying to emerge. And that's where the real work begins. Because growth isn't just about going forward. It's about letting the old you fall away. And that part doesn't go quietly. That part says, "This is too much. Who do you think you are? What if you can't handle it? What if they see the real you?" So you shrink. Not because you're weak, but because part of you is still loyal to who you had to be to get here. And we have to honor that. The overachiever, the perfectionist, the one who always had it together, the one who stayed small to be safe or quiet to be accepted. Those parts of you were brilliant. They helped you survive. They helped you adapt. But now, they're limiting you. You're not in danger anymore, but your body still thinks you are. Until you show it something different. So how do you do that? You breathe through the discomfort. You stay when you want to run. You speak when you want to hide. You soften when you want to defend. You feel when you want to numb. And in doing so, you rewire the system. You teach your body. This level of expansion is safe now. You give yourself permission to receive, without guilt, to rest, without proving, to express, without apology. Because you're not that child anymore. You're not stuck in that past. You're not defined by the struggle that formed you. And here's what I want you to hear clearly. Growth is not a threat. Growth is not punishment. Growth is not abandonment. Growth is not danger. Growth is love. Growth is truth. Growth is who you already are, revealing itself. So the next time you feel resistance, welcome it. Don't judge it. Get curious. Ask yourself, what part of me still thinks this is unsafe? What belief is being challenged right now? And am I willing to update that belief with love? Because once your body feels safe in your expansion, there is no limit to how free you can become. Chapter 11. Shifting from survival to expansion. There are only two ways to live. In survival or in expansion. Most people, without even realizing it, are living in survival. Not because they're in immediate danger, but because their nervous system still believes they are. They wake up, and without saying it out loud, the underlying script goes. What could go wrong today? How do I avoid pain? What do I need to do to be safe, to be enough, to stay in control? This is survival mode. And it's subtle. It doesn't always look like panic. Sometimes it looks like perfectionism. Sometimes it looks like being nice at the cost of your truth. Sometimes it looks like busyness, overworking, controlling every detail of your life. But the underlying energy is the same. I must protect myself. And here's the problem. You can't grow while you're protecting. You can't create while you're contracting. You can't truly connect while you're scanning the room for threats, even if those threats are just imagined emotional risks. Survival is about defense. Expansion is about openness. Survival is reactive. Expansion is creative. So how do you make the shift? It begins with awareness. Start noticing. How often are you bracing for something to go wrong? How often are you living in anticipation of rejection, disappointment, or failure? And then ask yourself, what if that wasn't a threat? What if I no longer needed to be on guard? Because the truth is, you're not in danger, you're in a pattern. And that pattern is outdated. It served a version of you that no longer exists. A younger you, a more fragile you, a version of you that had fewer resources, less support, less awareness. But that's not who you are today. And yet, the body doesn't know the difference until you show it. So the shift begins by consciously choosing a new baseline. Instead of asking, what do I need to protect? Ask, what wants to expand through me today? That single shift, from defense to curiosity, will change your life, because now you're available to life instead of defending against it. You start to notice opportunities instead of threats. You speak up instead of shrink down. You dream bigger, not because you're escaping the present, but because you trust that you're held. Expansion doesn't mean you never get scared. It means fear no longer gets to drive. It means you feel the old impulse to hide, to hesitate, to run. And you say, thank you for trying to protect me, but we're safe now. We're ready to grow. And then you take the step. Maybe it's a conversation. Maybe it's a boundary. Maybe it's asking for help, or showing up as your fullest, most unapologetic self. Whatever it is, you lean in. And the more you lean in, the more you teach your system. I am safe in my expansion. Not because nothing bad will ever happen, but because you've realized that your peace is no longer dependent on what happens. It's rooted in who you've become. That's mastery. That's sovereignty. That's living from your essence instead of your adaptation. So pause right now and ask yourself, where in my life am I still surviving? And where am I ready to expand? Not tomorrow, not next year, but now. Because this is the moment. This is the turning point where your life stops being a series of reactions and starts becoming a masterpiece of conscious expression. Expansion isn't something you chase, it's something you allow. And when you allow it, everything around you shifts to match the space you've created within. Chapter 12. Releasing the fear of decline. It's easy to pursue growth when things are going well. Your business is scaling. Your body's strong. Your influence is rising. And everything feels like it's trending up and to the right. The beautiful, seductive slope of success. But what happens when the graph dips? What happens when momentum slows? When your body changes? When the applause gets quieter? When what once made you feel powerful starts to fade? That's where the fear creeps in. And often, it's not even conscious. It shows up as anxiety, distraction, restlessness, a low-grade dread you can't quite name. But if you really slow down and listen, you'll find the story underneath. I'm afraid I've peaked. I'm afraid the best is behind me. I'm afraid of becoming irrelevant, invisible, forgotten. This is the fear of decline, the fear that the value of your life is somehow tied to your ability to constantly grow, to outperform yesterday, to earn more, do more, be more. And this fear, it's not yours. It's inherited. It comes from a culture obsessed with youth, with speed, with expansion. A culture that equates worth with output, beauty with age, success with constant increase. So it's no surprise that when things plateau or contract, we panic. We start chasing again, scrambling, pushing. Not because we're inspired, but because we're terrified. But let me offer something radical. What if decline isn't failure? What if it's grace? What if those quieter seasons, the plateaus, the pauses, the perceived slowing down, are sacred? What if they're not regressions, but reintegrations? Because just like nature, your life has seasons. There's the spring of new ideas, the summer of rapid growth, the autumn of harvest and transition. And yes, the winter of stillness. But none of these seasons are wrong. They're all part of the cycle. They're all part of expansion. Even the rest. If you were always in bloom, you'd burn out. If your body never changed, you'd never evolve. If your identity never softened, you'd never come home to who you are beyond it. So what's required here is a different kind of faith. Not faith that things will always grow, but faith that you're okay, even when they don't. Because who you are is not your momentum. It's not your visibility. It's not your six-pack, your follower count, your quarterly revenue. Who you are is the awareness behind all of it. And that essence, it doesn't decline. It deepens. It becomes more refined, more rooted, more still, more you. But you'll never meet that depth if you're obsessed with keeping everything going up. So let this be your permission slip to stop chasing infinity. Let go of the need to outperform yourself every week. Let go of the fear that less means you're falling behind. Let go of the idea that stillness equals stagnation. Instead, ask, what's here now that I've been too busy to feel? What's being born in the quiet? What deeper part of me is emerging now that the surface is still? Because the soul doesn't grow in numbers. It grows in presence. It grows in depth. It grows when you're willing to surrender the story of eternal increase and rest in the truth that you are whole. Even here, there is no decline. There is only unfolding. And every part of it is sacred. Chapter 13. Letting go of the future to live now. One of the greatest sources of human suffering is the simple illusion that peace exists in the future. It's a seductive story. When I finally get the job, when my relationship is perfect, when I have more time, more money, more clarity, then I'll feel at ease. But the future is a mirage. You're walking towards something that keeps moving. And every time you get close to the goalpost, it shifts. You earn the money and want more. You find love, but now you want it to feel a certain way. You find success, but now there's pressure to maintain it. The horizon always moves. So if peace is attached to getting there, wherever there is, you'll never arrive. Because you've trained your nervous system to outsource peace to a concept that doesn't even exist. The future isn't real. It's a projection, a mental construct, a movie you play in your mind, starring a version of you that doesn't exist yet, solving problems that haven't happened yet, hoping to feel a feeling that's available now. Let that land. Peace, freedom, love. These are not future outcomes. They are now experiences. But you'll never touch them if your attention is 20 minutes, 2 months, or 10 years ahead of this moment. The ego thrives in the future. It says, we'll be safe when, we'll feel better after, everything will make sense once. And in doing so, it creates psychological time, a gap between where you are and where you think you need to be. That gap? That's where anxiety is born. That's where pressure lives. That's where the war against the present begins. But the truth is, this is it. This moment is your life. Not what might happen. Not what could be. This, the conversation you're in, the breath in your lungs, the sensation in your body, the silence behind your thoughts. And here's the profound part. When you stop fighting this moment, it opens. When you stop resisting now, peace floods in. When you stop chasing a better then, you find the richness of now. But that requires trust. It requires letting go of the illusion that you're running out of time, that something's missing, that you're behind, that you need more to be whole. You don't. You just need to arrive, to drop the thought, to soften the grip, to feel the ground beneath your feet and realize nothing's wrong. Right now, in this very breath, you are okay. Right now, in this very moment, there is no emergency. Right now, there is no future. There is only now, and now, and now again. So here's the invitation. Catch yourself living in the future. Notice when your mind races ahead, when it spins in anticipation or fear. And gently, without judgment, come home to your breath, to your body, to your being. Ask yourself, where am I right now? What's actually happening? Can I be with this without needing to change it? Because the mind will try to sell you 1,000 some days. But the soul whispers, peace is now. Love is now. You are now. And you don't have to earn now. You just have to enter it. Chapter 14. The Trap of Hypotheticals. The human mind is brilliant. It can analyze, strategize, solve problems, build bridges, cure disease. But its brilliance comes with a shadow, because that same mind, if left unchecked, becomes a factory of fear. And its favorite tool, hypotheticals. What if I get sick? What if I lose them? What if I fail? What if it all falls apart? These imagined futures, these scenarios that haven't happened, are what keep most people in a constant state of stress. They're not reacting to life as it is. They're reacting to a story their mind created about what might be. It's not reality that's hurting them. It's the movie. A movie with no proof, no present tense evidence, just emotional projection. And here's what makes it more subtle. The body doesn't know the difference between what's imagined and what's real. If you think about a traumatic event or a terrifying possibility, your nervous system reacts as if it's happening now. You sweat. Your heart races. Your breath shallows. That's how powerful thought is. Which is why if your mind is living in a constant loop of hypotheticals, your body's living in a constant loop of survival. And that's exhausting, because you're carrying the emotional weight of events that don't even exist. You're playing out arguments that haven't happened. You're preparing for disasters that aren't coming. You're defending against judgments that live only in your imagination. Let that land. You're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist, outside of thought, and that's where your freedom lives. In seeing that the only thing keeping you in fear is a mental projection. Now, this isn't about becoming passive. It's not about ignoring responsibility or being naive. It's about returning to what's actually happening. Because here's the truth. You don't know what will happen. You never have. And pretending that you do, even under the banner of being prepared, is often just fear wearing the mask of wisdom. So what's the way out? Presence. Presence is the antidote to the hypothetical mind, because when you come back to what's real, your breath, your body, the room you're in, the story loses power, the movie fades, the projection stops running. You begin to realize, right now nothing's wrong. The mind may say otherwise, but the moment you stop feeding it attention, you stop feeding it energy. So the next time you catch yourself spiraling in a what-if loop, ask yourself, is this happening right now? Do I have direct evidence that this is true? And even if it did happen, who would I choose to be in that moment? Because courage isn't the absence of hypotheticals. It's the willingness to stay present despite them. It's choosing to live now, instead of dying 1,000 mental deaths in advance. And if your mind still insists on building futures, build beautiful ones. If you're going to use your imagination, let it serve you. What if it all works out? What if you're more resilient than you think? What if life is conspiring for you? Because the truth is, those stories are just as imaginary. So if you're going to live in a future, make it one that nourishes your nervous system. Or better yet, come back to now. Because now is the only place you've ever actually lived. Chapter 15. Grief as a portal to greater love. Grief isn't the opposite of love. It is love. It's love that has nowhere to go. It's love that used to have a direction, a person, a presence, a voice. And now it floats in open space, untethered. And that ache, that hollow feeling, that's not weakness. That's the echo of connection. See, grief only hurts because you love so deeply. It only feels overwhelming because something in you opened fully to another soul. And now that soul is gone, or they've changed, or time has taken them, or life has moved forward, while part of you still stands in the memory. But what if that ache wasn't something to get over? What if it was something to go through? Because grief, when met fully, doesn't close the heart. It breaks it open. It softens you, refines you. It makes you more available to the world, not less, if you let it. But most people don't know how to grieve. They apologize for it. They try to hide it. They try to be strong, which usually just means emotionally numb, or they intellectualize it. Well, it was their time, or everything happens for a reason. And while those phrases may be true on some level, they bypass what the heart needs to feel. Because grief isn't just an emotional process, it's a spiritual one. It's the part of you that realizes nothing is permanent. No one is guaranteed. Every moment is borrowed. Every breath a gift. And when you stop resisting that truth, when you stop trying to fast forward through the pain, something magical happens. You awaken to love's depth. You realize that grief is proof that you lived fully, that you allowed someone in, that you cared enough to break. And isn't that the point? To feel it all? To be cracked open by life and let the light pour in. I once worked with someone who had lost a parent decades ago. They thought they'd moved on. But all they'd really done was shut down. They hadn't cried, hadn't spoken of the memories, hadn't touched the photos, because it felt too big, too dangerous. But when we finally sat together and they let the tears come, the grief, the love, the loss, what came next wasn't more pain. It was freedom. Because they weren't just crying for the person who died. They were crying for the years they hadn't felt. And after the tears, a quiet peace, a tenderness, a reunion with love. So if you're grieving, someone, something, even a version of yourself, don't rush it. Don't try to be spiritual by avoiding it. Don't try to be strong by holding it in. Be human. Sit with it. Speak to it. Let it move through you. And know this. Your grief is not a burden. It's a blessing. It's not proof you're broken. It's proof you're alive. It's not the end of love. It's what remains when love has nowhere to go. And if you meet it fully, with tenderness, with presence, without trying to fix or force, you'll find something unexpected on the other side. A deeper love than you've ever known. Because the heart that has been broken is the one most ready to truly open. Chapter 16. Rewriting the story of loss. Loss is inevitable. People will leave. Things will change. Life, by its very nature, is impermanent. But while loss is part of the human experience, suffering around loss is often a result of the story we tell ourselves about it. See, the event is neutral. They left, they passed. The job ended. The chapter closed. But the mind wraps itself around that event like a vine, twisting, pulling, looping through all the meanings it can find. It shouldn't have happened that way. If I had done something different, maybe they'd still be here. I'll never be the same. This broke me. And so the pain of the event becomes entangled with the pain of the interpretation. And suddenly, you're no longer grieving a moment. You're carrying a narrative. That's where we get stuck, because we don't realize. We are not just grieving the loss itself. We're grieving the identity that was built with that person or experience. Who you were when they were around. Who you thought you had to be to keep them. Who you no longer know how to be without them. But here's the opportunity. You get to rewrite the story. Not erase it, not deny it, but transform it. You get to take the raw material of loss and create something sacred from it. Instead of, they left me, try. I was deeply loved, and now I carry that love forward. Instead of, this broke me, try. This showed me how open my heart truly is. Instead of, I'll never be the same, try. I'm becoming someone deeper, more present, more free. Because loss doesn't mean something's gone wrong. It means life is moving. And the stories that hold you hostage are simply requests, invitations, to meet this new moment without dragging the weight of what was. And yes, the pain is real. The tears are real. The quiet nights, the silence, the empty chair, all real. But the belief that you're broken, that your best days are behind you, that the past is the only place where love lived, that part isn't true. That's the story. And that's where your power lies. Not in rewriting history, but in reframing your relationship to it. So take a moment right now and ask yourself, what have I lost that I'm still defining myself by? What story am I still repeating that's keeping me from healing? And am I willing, lovingly, patiently, to let a new story be written? A story that honors what was, a story that includes the grief, but also a story that includes you, here and now, alive, expanding, becoming, because you don't owe it to your past to stay wounded. You don't need to wear your pain like a badge just to prove how much you cared. You can love them and still move forward. You can remember without reliving. You can feel the depth without drowning in it. And that's what freedom looks like. That's how we evolve through loss. Not by forgetting, but by rewriting. Not by letting go of the love, but by letting go of the limitation we attached to the loss. You're still here, which means there's still more to experience, still more to give, still more of you to uncover. Chapter 17. The Power of Self-Reflection and Listening. There's a quiet art most people never master. It's not meditation, it's not prayer, it's not mindfulness. It's listening, not listening to others, although that's important, but listening to yourself. Because most people aren't actually aware of the conversations happening inside their minds. They're too close to them, too identified. They don't hear their thoughts. They become them. They say, I'm anxious. I'm overwhelmed. I'm not good enough. As if that's truth, instead of just a thought passing through awareness. But what if you took a step back? What if you said, that's not me. That's a narrative. That's a pattern. That's programming. That's where power lives. Because the moment you observe a thought, you're no longer ruled by it. The moment you hear the pattern, you can disrupt it. The moment you witness your own beliefs, you can choose something new. And that's the gift of self-reflection. It creates space between you and the identity you've been unconsciously performing. It lets you ask questions like, is this really true? Where did I learn this? Who would I be without this thought? And those questions, they begin to dissolve the illusion. They begin to loosen the grip of old wounds disguised as logic. But here's the thing. You can't access that power if you're always busy, always scrolling, always talking, always doing. You need stillness, because insight doesn't shout. Truth doesn't knock the door down. It whispers. It arises in the silence, in the gaps between thought, in the breath between reactions. That's why I always say, one of the most powerful things you can do is become a better listener of your own inner world. That's what I practice. When something triggers me, I don't fight it. I don't react. I listen. What's the belief here? What did I make this mean? What part of me is trying to protect something? And often, the answer is surprising. It's not about the current situation. It's about an old wound, an old script, a younger version of me that's still trying to survive something long past. But that part of me doesn't need to be fixed. It needs to be heard. And once I listen, once I bring compassion instead of criticism, something shifts. The grip softens. The breath returns. The moment becomes less about defense and more about awareness. That's how healing begins. Not through force, but through presence. So ask yourself, when was the last time I truly listened to myself? Not to my fears. Not to my to-do list, but to my being. The part of me that doesn't perform. The part of me that doesn't need to be right. The part of me that just is. Beneath the noise. Because the more you listen, the more you'll remember. You were never broken. You were just buried beneath beliefs that weren't yours. You don't need more information. You need deeper integration. And that begins in the stillness, not with answers, but with the willingness to be with the question. So give yourself that gift. Slow down, reflect, listen. Because your soul is speaking, and it's been waiting for you to finally hear. Chapter 18. Why Journaling and Prayer Matter. There are conversations you'll never have out loud. Not because you're hiding, not because you're ashamed, but because certain truths are sacred, certain questions too raw, too delicate, too deep to hand over to just anyone. That's why journaling and prayer are so powerful. They are the sacred spaces where you meet yourself, without the need to perform, explain, or impress. They're not about being poetic or religious. They're not about doing it right. They're about being honest. In a way, the world rarely gives you permission to be. When you sit down with a journal, you're not writing for anyone else. You're not writing to be understood. You're writing to hear yourself. Because the mind moves fast, it loops, it jumps timelines. It rehearses the past and forecasts the future. But when you write, something slows down. You take what was swirling in your head and externalize it. You give shape to the formless. You turn confusion into clarity, emotion into insight. Journaling is like holding up a mirror. Not to your face, but to your being. You start to see the patterns. You hear the voice beneath the noise. You uncover the belief beneath the reaction. You might start with something simple. I feel tight in my chest. I'm scared they'll leave. I don't know who I am without this role. And just like that, you're no longer performing. You're revealing. That's where healing lives. Now, prayer. Let's talk about that. Prayer doesn't have to mean kneeling beside a bed, hands folded. It doesn't require a belief in a specific God or any doctrine at all. At its core, prayer is self-expression met with presence. It's the moment you drop the mask and say, "This is what's real for me right now." It might be messy, it might be angry, it might be silent, but it's honest. And in that honesty, something opens. You move beyond the ego's agenda. You soften the edges of control. You surrender, not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to realize you never had to carry it all alone. Prayer isn't about asking for things. It's about reconnecting with the part of you that already feels whole. The part that knows you're held, even in chaos. The part that remembers even when your mind forgets. That love is the fabric beneath all things. So journal, pray, speak, write, whisper, weep. Whatever your version looks like, make space for it. Because if you don't have a place to express your truth, you'll start leaking it in your relationships. You'll project it, suppress it, or let it fester into resentment or fear. But when you give it space, it transforms. The wound becomes wisdom. The doubt becomes clarity. The fear becomes compassion. You start to relate to your inner world not as something to fix, but as something to befriend. And over time, you build a relationship with yourself so strong, so steady, so loving, that you no longer need the world to understand you. Because you understand you, and from that place, you're untouchable. Chapter 19. The Spiritual Practice of Self-Permission. If there's one thing keeping most people stuck, it's not lack of talent. It's not lack of intelligence. It's not even fear. It's the quiet, constant waiting for permission. Permission to rest. Permission to speak. Permission to dream big. Permission to let go. Permission to take up space without apology. It shows up in the subtlest ways. You want to say something, but you scan the room first. You want to make a change, but wait for someone to approve. You feel joy, and then question if it's too much. You feel grief, and wonder if you're allowed to take up time with it. We're constantly looking outward, asking the world, "Am I allowed to feel this?" Is it okay to want that? Do I have the right to be this free? But what if you stopped waiting? What if you became the source of permission? Because here's the truth, and it might sound radical. No one is coming. There is no external figure who will one day step in and finally grant you the freedom to live fully. Not your parents, not your partner, not society, not your past self. You are the gatekeeper. And every moment you delay your truth, every time you censor your expression, every time you shrink for comfort, you're reinforcing a false idea that you need someone else's validation to be yourself. But freedom doesn't ask for permission. It offers it to yourself moment by moment. So what does that look like in practice? It looks like catching yourself in the pause and leaning in instead of holding back. It looks like speaking even when your voice trembles. It looks like resting before you burn out. It looks like allowing your full emotional range, not just the pleasant ones. It looks like saying yes when your heart is ready and saying no without guilt. It looks like writing your story in real time without editing it to make others comfortable. And yes, it can feel scary, because if you've lived most of your life seeking approval, stepping outside of that pattern feels like betrayal. But what if it's not betrayal? What if it's coming home? What if giving yourself permission is the most spiritual thing you could do? Because when you stop outsourcing your authority, you begin to embody your essence. You stop living for applause and start living for alignment. You stop asking, will they like me? And start asking, am I honoring me? And here's the paradox. The moment you stop needing approval, people feel your authenticity. And that's what draws them in. Not the performance, not the polish, the raw, real, unfiltered you. So here's your invitation right now. Give yourself permission to change, to rest, to begin again, to say what needs to be said, to feel what needs to be felt, to be who you actually are, even if it makes others uncomfortable. Because every time you give yourself permission, you don't just free yourself, you show others what's possible. You become the living embodiment of what so many are still waiting for. And in that, your life becomes a practice, not of perfection, but of permission. Chapter 20, Living as Love, Not as Fear. At the end of all the healing, beyond all the insight, all the tears, all the breakthroughs, there is only one thing left: love. Not the love you perform, not the love you chase, not the romanticized, polished, filtered version, but love as a state of being. Love without needing a reason. Love without condition. Love that's not earned, simply remembered, because you were never meant to live in fear. That's not your native language. That's not your truth. Fear is a byproduct of forgetting. Fear is what arises when we believe we're separate, from ourselves, from others, from life. It says, I must protect. I must control. I must be perfect. I must not be seen too much or not enough. I must earn my place in the world. But love doesn't play that game. Love doesn't negotiate for worthiness. Love is. And when you strip it all back, the identity, the expectations, the wounds, the strategies, what remains is your essence. And your essence is love. You've just been afraid. Afraid to be seen. Afraid to lose. Afraid to trust. Afraid to let go of the illusion that control will keep you safe. But let me say this as clearly as I can. You were not born to live in fear. You were born to remember love, to become the space in which all of your humanity is welcome. Your joy, your grief, your anger, your laughter, to become the presence that can hold it all, without making any of it wrong. That's love. Love isn't soft. Love isn't passive. Love is power, because it's the only force that dissolves shame, that breaks down ego, that transforms pain into purpose. So what does it mean to live as love? It means choosing compassion over control, truth over performance, presence over planning, connection over competition. It means walking into each moment without an agenda, just an open heart. It means saying, even if I lose, even if I fail, even if I'm rejected, I will not betray myself. It means trusting that what you are is enough, right now, always. Because love isn't something you get. It's something you return to. And from that place, you don't need the world to behave, for you to be okay. You don't need everything to make sense. You don't need to be in control. You don't need everyone to understand you, because you understand yourself. And from that wholeness, you can finally give without depletion. You can finally receive without guilt. You can finally rest, not because everything is done, but because you are done chasing what was never missing. This is the invitation. Let love be the source. Let love be the strategy. Let love be the standard. And let fear dissolve in the presence of your remembering. Because this is not just the end of a journey, it's the beginning of a new one. Not based on fixing, but based on being. Being what you've always been. Love. And now we've come full circle. Not to an ending, but to a threshold. Because this work, it doesn't conclude with the final chapter. It begins with you, with your willingness to pause, to listen, to question what you've believed, to let go of who you were told to be, and to become who you truly are. You've walked through fear. You've sat with grief. You've dismantled old stories. And most importantly, you've remembered that you are the architect of your own inner world. Not through control, but through awareness. Not through perfection, but through presence. So take these words, not as answers, but as mirrors, not as instructions, but as invitations. Because your truth will always be more powerful than any teaching. And if you ever forget, come back to stillness, to breath, to love, because who you are has never been lost, only waiting to be fully lived. Thank you for listening.